Welcome. Today's webinar will focus on a newly reimagined and slightly renamed product, Risk Monitoring. At a glance, Risk Monitoring is an alerting system that swiftly notifies state agencies when incoming system, claim, or behavioral data is found to be, risky. It goes further by providing a powerful set of data analytics tools to help make rapid case assessments and to identify long-term trends and organizational needs. In this way, it acts as a daily workhorse that has the potential to be a transformative force for your organization. We'll discuss this a bit later on. First, I'd like to introduce and thank my fellow co-presenter, Matthew Esner, one of Collier's talented and experienced account representatives. As a former state agency staff member for Missouri DESE, Matthew has been instrumental in helping to guide the development of risk monitoring. My name is Andrew Ripley, and I'm the product manager tasked with making this product one that absolutely delights our customers. On a personal note, this product is one that is near and dear to my heart as it correlates with a lot of the more scientific work I've done in the past working in healthcare, biotechnology, and learning management industries. Today, I want to provide a brief background before we quickly dive in and see the product in action. That will set us up for some exciting discussion later on about what this novel tool can do for your organization in the short term and how it can definitely affect long-term sustainable change in a rather unique and attainable way. First, let's spend one quick slide talking in general about what we're looking to achieve. The idea with risk monitoring isn't just to provide data, but to programmatically evaluate that data, to suss out for you just the concerning bits that need your attention the most. In this way, it's like a digital assistant. We're probably all familiar with Siri and Alexa, two platform-specific AIs. However, I don't think these are great comparisons for what we want risk monitoring to be. They currently fall more in the realm of the reactive camp. Alexa, play my music, or Siri, remind me to pick up my dry cleaning. Now, what we want is something more proactive, something more like Jarvis. For anyone not familiar, Jarvis is the AI sidekick to Tony Stark, aka Iron Man from the Marvel films. If you're not familiar with the movies, what's great about Jarvis is he defends Tony without requiring Tony's explicit direction or guidance. Tony's focused on what's in front of him, hero stuff. Meanwhile, Jarvis is always scanning and watching the field, only intervening to say something like, "Tony, watch your back," when the circumstances are right. In that same vein, risk monitoring is designed to have your back. Every night, it will comb through your data, vigilantly scanning for bogeys and alerting you when there could be trouble, but only if it's actually something noteworthy. The idea is to swiftly identify potential problems so they can be assessed and addressed proactively, not reactively. I really wanted to, at this point, just jump in and show you what we built, but I found I needed to provide a couple key definitions and some specifics first. So, without further ado, scenarios are something you'll hear me say a lot. They're essentially risk recipes. We start by identifying a specific risky situation that could cause concern for a state agency. Let's take as an example a sponsor or site user saving a claim over and over again. This may be a sign that they need additional training, remediation, or worse, it could be someone intentionally trying to ramp up or ramp down a claim to maximize reimbursement. Once we've established the need, we then have to figure out how we can formulate a qualifying test. As ingredients, we always start with some amount of new incoming data, but we can also utilize existing historical data as desired. We apply a formula and compare the result with a configurable threshold. This is pretty cool, so later on we'll actually do a little mini workshop on it. But once a scenario has been built, we can now actually start testing real data in the state systems. Each instance of this is known as a case. Now, cases may or may not meet the threshold, but we will only send alerts on cases where the value has been attained. Otherwise, non-qualifying cases can always be found and analyzed by your personnel within the scenario's dashboard. In fact, within each dashboard, we tend to also highlight data that is just below the threshold for extra protection. But I am getting a bit ahead of myself. So let's start with a straightforward one, scenario 6A. This is the one I mentioned before where it looks at multiple claim saves and alerts you when the amount becomes quote unquote excessive. On the left is the specification document that details the scenario, which really has a lot of helpful, great information in it. On the right are my cliff notes, though. We'll start by looking at every claim that is saved, and we take note of the number of times it has been saved with errors. For this scenario, we aren't concerned with any historical data, so none is used. We also apply a simple formula that compares a count of the number of times this claim was saved, again with errors, against the default threshold of 9. So anytime a claim is saved 10 times or more, an alert will be triggered. A few notes while we're here. This threshold can be dialed up or dialed down to suit your needs. Additionally, if you have really good vision on the left, you might be able to see that this scenario operates in CACFP, SFSP, and S&P. It all starts with an email that looks something like this. These get sent when a case or multiple cases meet the threshold. Clicking the link will take the user into the system, to the Pulse screen, where they can learn more. Each box here acts as a configurable control panel for scenario alerting. It's where you can change who receives alerts and at what threshold. We call these pulses. By default, we set up a pulse alert for every scenario, but more can be created, allowing you granular control depending on your risk level and distribution preferences. Clicking on the alert for 6A will take us to the scenario's dashboard, where we can investigate further. On the dashboard, you'll see different readouts or views known as widgets. Each of these is designed to show the scenario data in a specific way. The top two widgets are tooled to meet the exact scenario specifications and will only show cases from the last 7 days. Below, we have widgets set up to show subsets of that data or comprehensive historical data. For now, though, let's just focus on these top two. The widget on the left simply shows you a count of the number of sponsors that had site claim saves with errors in the last 7 days meeting our threshold. So in this case, there's only one. On the right, we have a table view of this data that can be used to zone in on the case, providing contextual fields like sponsor ID, name, program name, and claim date. You can also see the specific data which was flagged by the system. In this case, the claim was saved 13 times with errors. We can also see related data, like how many times this claim was successfully saved, known as validated saves. And here we can see also a total number of saves, 15. We also see who modified or updated the claim and when they modified it. Looking at behavioral data like this can be really powerful. Besides the obvious, it can also be indicative not only of individuals that may need help, but also systems and training curriculum that may need improvement. Now let's take a high-level look at the rest of the page. Just below the top two widgets, we show scenario data from the last 7 days, but now broken up by program. Here's CACFP, S&P, and SFSP. Then we have graphical widgets showing you breakdowns by error amounts over the last couple of months. And lastly, we have another data detail widget at the bottom. This table shows you all the applicable cases regardless of the threshold requirements that we spoke about. This table combines exceptionally well with the filters you see on the right. These filters let you specify or despecify sets of data you want or don't want to see. The data detail widget will then update, showing you just the subset you're interested in. So for instance, if I want to compare programs from last year, I could start by filtering out other years and then get a count from each program so that I can compare them. Combined with relative volume, this might tell you where to bolster training efforts. Or perhaps I was out on vacation and want to look at incoming data from last week. I can specify that in the last updated date filter up at the top. This has a really slick interface, so I can easily choose all the days from last week. You'll see the data is updated, And now when I head to the bottom, I'm seeing a smaller subset of data.
Yeah, Andrew, and that's a great point and use of what this new tool can actually provide some of our customers. If you're familiar with your core products, you're used to seeing who made modifications and when they were last made. If you're looking at your history, this new how many times claims have been saved is a new feature that was specifically put in so that we could achieve some of the end goals that our customers were looking for with this risk monitoring tool. So how many times a claim had been saved is not something you'd currently be able to pull out of your core system, but this new risk monitoring tool gives you access into this new data that we are actually saving and being able to show you.
Perfect. So let's go on and let's explain the next scenario here once PowerPoint catches up with us. There we go. So we want to look at one more scenario, but first I want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, please just go ahead and put it in the chat window on the right. All right, so next we're going to look at scenario 5B, which happens to be one of my favorites because it gives anyone new to risk monitoring a glimpse into some of the higher level assessments that we can do with this platform. As before, we've detailed scenario specifications to help anyone using this product. I've got my Cliff Notes though on the right, and this shows you again, we're solely looking at new claim data, but now we're diagnosing meal counts, enrollment numbers, and serving days. This form is pretty fun, so we'll chunk it up on the next slide. We're essentially creating a proportion comparing actual meal counts against a proxy figure for the maximum number of meal counts. So if your meal count, for instance, reached 100% or greater, we'd flag them and tell you about it. One thing to note before we go further is that this scenario supports CACFP, SSO, and S&P. SFSP does not have enrollment figures, so it wasn't included. Here's the general concept behind the formula. We want to compare actual meal counts against that theoretical proxy for maximum meal counts. In this case, we take enrollment times serving days as a working representation of maximum number of meals. It's not perfect, as there are some known exceptions, but in general, it's pretty rare that you'll go a full month without a few students missing class or bringing their meals from home. So I put a practical example up here on the right. Our actual meal count comes in at 527, while enrollment is 26, and we're serving for a total of 20 days. So if we simplify that a few times, we'll see we have 527 divided by 520, which gives us 1.013 and some change. Now, what we're actually looking for is a nice looking percentage. So, we want to know whether or not the result is equal to or greater than 100%. So do a little bit more cleanup, multiply that by 100. And there we see that we're at 101%. So we got a pretty top heavy product here. So in this case, in this example, we end up with a case that would meet the threshold. In actuality, they served more meals than you would expect given their enrollment and serving days. Now let's actually get into the scenario and let's look at and see what this looks like in the actual app. So this is scenario 5B. As before, the widgets on the top row represent cases that meet our thresholds and were modified in the last 7 days. The idea here is if you just do one thing and investigate these cases when you're alerted, you'll be highly efficient. Below, we look at percentage buckets, so the user can also see instances the system has found where the result of our formula is a little bit less. So here we have 98 to 99%, and here we have 96 to 97%. Now you may be thinking this looks like a ton of alert data, especially if your eyes have settled on this 4,649 figure. But I'll remind you, we don't have any filters applied down here below, so we're actually looking at 8 years worth of data. If we were to pick just the most recent year, we can see perhaps a more relevant subset of data. There we go. Now we're only looking at 30 high-risk cases, 12 below that, and 22 in that 96 to 97 bucket for a total of 64 cases. Now down below this, we can see a distribution of what this looks like in a bar chart. And last but not least, we can dig into the particulars in the data details section here. This can, by the way, be easily exported into a CSV, or actually there's multiple formats that you can do here. Now, this is a lot of data, so let's take a practical example. Let's say I only want to look at S&P. I can filter everything else out by doing that. And then let's also look at cases just where the proportion is pretty top heavy. Let's look at things that are greater than or equal to 105%. There's actually a really slick interface here, so you can come in and you can actually really detail what you're interested in looking at, but I'll go ahead and leave the greater than or equal to in place. And here the data again will be filtered down. You can see the distribution graph is updated. And now my huge data set is limited to just 14 rows of data. It's pretty powerful stuff. And I've just shown you 2 of our 12 scenarios.
Yeah. And another thing that's great about this one in particular, Andrew, and why some states have had interest in this is, when your sponsors come in to do their site claims, there are instances where they can submit and they put their claims in and they may get a warning, but they're still able to submit that claim. And so when you come in for approval, that's notified, but this actually gives you a way that you could look and see, are there actually instances where there were actually more meals claimed than what we feel actually should have been based on these number of days served. So what Andrew showed you with that formula is really pretty cool, how we were able to get that set up to pull those instances out for you to easily see with this tool.
All right, thanks, Matthew. Let's take a glance. We've got 12 scenarios, so let's just kind of real briefly, not as in-depth, just run through them just so you are all familiar with what we've got. We'll start at the bottom since those are kind of actually the ones we've already looked at, so they'll be pretty familiar. So 6B looks at the same thing as 6A, but instead of looking at just error saves, this actually looks at the validated saves, so it's kind of like the mirror opposite. 5A does the same thing as 5B, but it compares the enrollment and serving days against actual meal counts, but this time at a sponsor level instead of at a site level. In fact, for all the other scenarios, we're using the same naming convention. A's are sponsor level scenarios and B's are site level scenarios. So scenarios 2 through 4, these are looking at historical claim count data and determines if the incoming meal counts are identical to or nearly identical to the previous month's meal count. Scenario 1 does something similar, but instead of looking at meal counts, we took ADP numbers. As with scenario 5, the natural variance in participation, it kind of makes you wonder when you see back-to-back repetitive numbers appearing again and again. So we want to next look at our product goals. We knew we had to have a very powerful and reliable data framework to use as the foundation for this, or really nothing else that we built would matter. The next thing, we wanted a platform to deliver data in a readily accessible, human intelligible, and malleable way. We wanted to make it configurable and adaptable to suit your needs, even as those needs change. As I mentioned before, we focused on building a platform that can grow organically as your circumstances change or as new ideas arise. In this way, risk monitoring was built to grow organically. We looked at 12 scenarios, but the system is capable of running many more. Lastly, like Jarvis, risk monitoring works in the background, checking data nightly, and only gets your attention when it's really warranted. Next, since some of you may have already seen our data suite product Ad Hoc Analytics, the subject of our last webinar, I thought it might make sense or it might be helpful just to talk a little bit about the differences between the two. AHA, as we like to call it in general, is much less prescriptive. It shows you a vast amount of all your data. It's molar in nature, which makes it exceptional at building and analyzing regular and ad hoc reports. From a data science perspective, it is better at describing more open-ended questions like how and why. Risk monitoring, on the other hand, is much more specific, cluing in just on specific data sets that can be used to identify and assess risk. as we talk through with scenarios, we're not just displaying that data, we're also creating formulas around the business rules to create meaningful micro tests. In essence, risk monitoring asks the same yes or no question over and over again every night and highlights just the yes cases for you. A quick analogy I'll offer. For anyone familiar with mobile mapping software like Google Maps, or I really like Waze, these apps are pretty expansive. You can use them to get directions to anywhere in the world, to Yellowstone if you want. My wife and I recently used these to scope out neighborhoods as we were buying a new house. But you can also check out, satellite and street views. Really, there's an amazing world in that one application. But on my way to work, I'll sometimes get a notification that warns me when there's a big accident along my commute, and that might affect my drive time. Well, that in a nutshell is risk monitoring. Except you need to do your commute hundreds or thousands of times every day, and I'll just go ahead and stop right there because I don't think anyone wants to really imagine that. All right. So lastly, I wanted to be direct and talk a little bit of WIFM, or what's in it for me. So as we've all seen, risk monitoring is very tactical, providing essentially a daily to-do list of risky cases to check out. What I think I love best around this product is how transformative that daily or weekly routine can be for an institution over time. Normally, organizational change is a huge process where you need slogans and campaigns, and you're constantly planning, reassessing, and you're endlessly pushing. Risk monitoring has the potential to transform an organization passively just by employing it regularly. The end result is an organization that is more proactive, finding issues before they become larger problems. One of the more obvious things it does, however, is just simple peace of mind. This is derived from the comprehensive nightly audits that it does. The nice thing about this is because it's comprehensive scanning sets of your data nightly, this isn't just a reduction of fear of the unknown, but an actual reduction of potential issues. With this, though, keep in mind that over time, more situations will inevitably arise. And because this platform is built for extensibility, it will only get stronger. And the net that we can create for you gets tighter and tighter and more secure. A couple other short-term deliverables is that it generally reduces the amount of time needed before discovering risky situations. And it may perhaps even find others that would have otherwise gone undiscovered. State agencies' current tools are slower and require a significant amount of effort over time to be comprehensive. As we saw earlier, it also provides tools and contextual data to assist your team's case assessment. But what's also great about the tool is that it can be used at a higher level to help determine programs, processes, training, software, and other error-prone areas in need of improvement. It can help you figure out which sponsors or sites consistently have issues and where you can intervene early. And the same thing goes for individual users. Lastly, it can be used to assess if efforts over time have been, or if previous efforts have been able to be successful to attain the desired goals.
Wow. Andrew, impressive stuff there. Really appreciate you giving us that quick glimpse into this new risk monitoring tool, and even the analogies that you provided for us, I think help visualize and provide for the customers, what this tool is intended to do. So I wanted to provide just a quick wrap up for everyone here before we jump off this webinar. First thing is just a quick recap, taking a look at it a little bit more from like the state agency's perspective. So when we look at this recap, one of the first things I hope that you were able to see and grasp from Andrew's demonstrations here is that we really intended this tool to help build confidence in your administration of your child nutrition programs. From working, as Andrew mentioned, I previously worked with the state of Missouri and now working with state agency customers for the past 4 years. What I've always loved and admire about this industry is that everyone goes to work each day hoping to do the right thing, and they just want to see kids get fed in the correct manner. And so I think this tool is going to help really build confidence in your staff and in your programs that you're doing the right things and you're not letting things slip through the crack. And the way you do that is it's got the targeted daily monitoring. So you're looking at specific goals. And the great news is as Andrew showed you, it's built so that it can be expanded upon. If we need to add more scenarios or new checks need to come in, that's something that can be built into this new new and powerful tool. We also want you to be proactive. I know that was something Andrew hit on as well, is from working with so many state agencies, you really want to provide the insights and the training on how you can help your sponsors do their jobs better. This gives you insights into maybe particular instances of where you see people struggling, and helps you to do that targeted training. You also could see there's many filters, and it allows you to make customizable views for individual scenarios. So if you have particular instances that you want to go and look into, you can use the current dashboards to drill down in and really take a look at a customized situation. And lastly, I think you could tell by the interface, it was intended to give you that nice, quick, simple view so that you're not overwhelmed. You know, some of those numbers, as Andrew showed you, can get kind of eye-opening. You're like, holy cow. But if you look at just what those pulses were, that's a much simpler view, but then you have that quick access so that you can actually dive in and say, okay, I know that I've got this instances, but maybe there were more, and should I look into this as a more systemic problem? So it's got that nice simple view, but you can always dive in and get some more detail. So lastly, I wanted to give you guys just some next steps that you can do. If you had questions throughout the webinar, if you've entered those in the chat box, we will take those and make sure that we get that addressed and sent back out to the group to be addressed. We also, if you had specific questions, you know, a lot of times you see this information and something comes to your mind afterwards, or you'd like to ask that question, feel free to submit any of your specific questions out to your account executives. We'll be happy to take those in and get those responses back out to you. The other thing I'd encourage you to do is we have had a lot of states express interest in this type of product. And so maybe there's something that you'd like to know what some of your other colleagues across the nation are thinking about with this particular product in general. So I'd welcome you to go out to the CTS customer forum. You can post a comment out to that forum and then let others know and see what kind of feedback you gather from them. And then as far as this webinar in particular, we really appreciate you joining us today. Each of you will be getting a follow-up email from your account executives. We'll also provide you a link with the recording for this webinar. So if it's something that you'd like to either show a colleague who couldn't attend, or just reference back to take another look at it, you'll have access to that recording. So with that, I wanted to say thank you for joining us today. Sincerely wanted to also thank Andrew for running us through this program.
Thank you.
He's put a lot of time and effort. Yeah, and he's put a lot of time and effort into this. I think you can see from the detailed sheets that he's got, specs ready, the demonstration that he provided for us. Hope you really got a good feeling of what this risk monitoring tool is that you may have been hearing about conceptually in the past. So thank you for joining us. If you need to reach out to us, Andrew's information is there as well as mine. We'd be happy to help you in any way that we can. And with that, we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.